Hello everyone, this is week 4 in the present set, and as mentioned I'm demonstrating painting a loose flower today. I had hoped that my hellebores would be more helpful by now, but still not that good. So I have a lovely yellow primula that I thought I would paint. Yellow is quite a tricky colour, and that is particularly why I thought I would paint a yellow one. So I'll not be using any pencil today at all, as I can be freer with my approach without drawing. So using this technique takes quite a little bit of thinking time before you start. So that you can get a rough idea of where you want your composition to go, but at the same time allowing some freedom for the watercolour and the painting to sort of dictate itself to an extent. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen today and what the result will be, but I'll keep on painting and hope that I end up with something that looks nice. I don't know how long it'll take either, or whether I'll have to stop and start. It can be quite quick painting loosely, but that doesn't mean that you can't be careful. You still can control the paint and the water to an extent, and you need to do that. But as I keep saying, and it is contradictory, that you can also allow it freedom to make its own way and dictate itself a bit, as I hope you'll see as this painting develops. Okay, I always begin with a focal point, so that's what I will do today, and then work out from that particular point. And then if you've put enough work and some detail into that focal point, whatever you allow to go after that and be freer will, help to tell the story if you've got a good focal point. These are the colours I'm going to use, and I'm keeping quite a limited palette, but I'm also going to allow some of the colour to float into the background and blend the background colour in it as well. So here goes. I've got a nice big round brush, a flat, with a good point, sorry, no flat. I'm just going to turn the music down. I never know quite what it's going to do, the music. It goes soft and heavy. But at the same time, if you haven't got a nice big fat is what I want to say, round brush, maybe try, if you've got a nice mop brush, that also will help to loosen you, and it has a lovely lovely point as well, but holds a lot of paint and water. But I'm using a sable brush, which is what I'm more used to, and that's what I'm going to use today. But sable will also hold more paint and water and allow you to be freer and maybe even lose control a little bit. So I'm going to choose this kind of area for my focal point. So I'm starting with one flower here, and I'm going to go nice and big so you can see what I'm doing, because yellow doesn't show up quite so well as some other colours. But leaving a little area in the centre there to pop in a nice loose centre if I can. So I don't have to touch that petal if I don't want to, but I am actually just going to let that float a little bit into that area there. And this is a Cadbury yellow pale that I'm using. It is actually quite a large petaled primula, this one. So that does help me to stay loose. The larger the flower that you choose, the easier it is to actually paint loosely, because then you won't fiddle and you've got plenty of space within that flower to put any little detail that you may need, but at the same time keeping it loose. So this is going to dry up at least 3 times lighter than when I'm applying it. So bear that in mind. Put enough pigment on your brush so that your flower won't weaken. While that's still damp, I'm going to start putting a background in. I'm actually going to work my background colour, which I've chosen as cobalt blue. I'm going to start popping that on as I go, so that some of it will blend into the flower and create maybe some nice green shadowy colours. And I won't know what I've got until I've allowed it to dry, and I'm not going to judge it at this point at all, but allowing some of this lovely colour to flow into the background. It's going to make nice shadowy colours where it mingles with the yellow, a sort of greeny grey, which is also very pretty. I'm keeping the outside edge nice and wet so that I don't get a hard edge there unless I want one. Okay, so going to be brave now. It has a very sort of pretty centre, but I'm actually just letting that float into the yellow. And dividing some of the petals with a bit of shadow colour. And leaving it. So what I've created there is a yellow flower with a greeny grey centre, dividing up some of the petals with the shadow and some background. So now I need to work out from there with another flower. The flowers in my pot are very close together actually, so this one's almost touching the one I've just painted. So I'm holding my brush quite loosely and a little bit higher towards the end of the brush handle. So that's quite a nice shape. Tiny little bit of blue going into the centre here now. Not too much because I can't see all of that flower, it's quite closed up. But popping in a little bit more of that background between, not worrying that I'm allowing the paint to blend into the area that I've already painted, because I know that when it dries up it's going to look nice. So I'm keeping control where I want to and not touching anything that I've painted already. So important to allow white paper to be left. So this is a nice opportunity here where this space is to actually just paint maybe just parts of one of these flowers that I can see here. Got hair there. And allowing it to come back into the area that I've already painted with the background. So that's peeping out and becoming part of the background colours. So thinking ahead all the time and looking back also at what I've painted and trying to maybe catch something at the right time to actually just pop a little bit more definition into the centre here. But it's still damp, so touching only a little bit in and touching as little as possible. So I've got 2 flowers now. Let's pop another one over here, I think. Yeah, this actual primrose has got a lot of petals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm actually minimising that and not putting in quite so many petals as I see. And just indicating the impression that I'm getting with this flower in its little white pot. And I am painting more quickly than I would if I was not doing a demonstration, because I want to get as much done as I can for you to see. So you can take your time, somewhat more than I'm doing at the moment. Right, more background now. And it is turning a lovely, this cobalt blue is a really pretty blue, and it's turning into a lovely greeny grey when it touches the yellow. So nothing garish going on here at all. So I'm getting further out towards the edge of my painting. I have a sort of an idea where I want it to go, and I have actually got the pot of flowers in front of me to guide me, but I'm not trying to copy it precisely. I have an idea of the sort of shape that I want to end up, and I'll have to start putting some leaves in a minute, so I don't want to bring that background colour too far down. But I can paint some leaves over it if I need to. So there's some little bit of definition going on when I separate the petals with the background colour, which is also being used as the shadow in the actual flower. Deepen it anywhere you feel you need to as you go along while it's still damp, but touch as little as you possibly can. I've also got my Aureolin and the Windsor Blue red shade going on for the green areas in the centre of the flowers. So a very limited palette today. There, that's another little flower done. Okay, where can I go now? I'll get the flowers in, I think, before I start painting any leaf. Right, there's a nice little flower here looking out towards that side of the page. So thinking about the shape that I'm ending up with for my composition as I go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there is an odd number going on, but when flowers are touching each other like this, you don't need to worry too much about the rule of 3 or 5 or odd numbers. Right, so that's popping outside there. So I'm purposely allowing this to bleed and creating a nice loose centre because I don't want detail there. Right, bringing this background down through now. And I can actually take some of the green perhaps after a while when this is dry and bring some of the darker sort of leaf shapes into the centre of the flowers where I need to bring a bit of depth back in, because it's a lovely loose and free and light picture at the moment, but I actually do want to put some depth in somewhere at some point. Right, so just popping a little bit more into my focal point here, just so that that's hopefully where the eye will go before disappearing around the picture and looking elsewhere. Okay, so varied the colours and tones, the tones of my flowers as much as I can, but yellow is tricky to do that with. It can get muddy, so be careful if you're painting a yellow flower. I'm going to now start working on some leaf. And they're the trickiest leaves, I think, to paint normally, but if I'm painting it loosely, maybe it won't seem quite so challenging. So this is an opportunity now to start getting in some nice darks. But keeping those leaves loose at the same time. So if you make a shape on an outline for any of your flowers or leaves, make sure you quickly bring colour back in so that you're not creating a hard edge on anything at all. Right, so there's one little leaf. I can drop some water back in to make some texture. I can drop some depth back in to create some texture while that's still very wet, and it is very wet. Or it can just be left. Right, so that's one leaf. I've got a strange shaped leaf sticking up here. So I'll pop that in. It's curled over. So look at your subject and find all the little interesting bits and pieces that you could incorporate into your picture, not necessarily always following exactly what you're seeing, and change it. You can change the placement around. Right, so that now needs very little bit of light background just to bring it back into the main part of the picture. And because my background has now started to dry up, I can actually indicate other shapes by popping the background shape in, colour in, and making nice shapes that might be appropriate by leaving a lighter colour underneath working negatively. Okay, right, so I'm running out of blue here, just mixing up a bit more blue with some clean water. Got 3 jars of water going on. Right, so that's looking good. Pleased so far. Let's have a leaf now coming out from this side. It's another lovely shape, because actually these leaves can look a little bit heavy and overpowering. So if you're painting something that's delicate like this, lovely delicate colour and loosely, you need to think about the shapes of your leaf so that they don't actually overtake. Each time you paint a leaf, think about whether or not it's going to be too much, or whether it will enhance your overall composition. So I'm allowing some of that Windsor blue to appear more or less on its own sometimes, to just bring in a little bit more blue and another colour, another tone if you like, which I think looks quite nice. And actually I see a certain amount of blue in some of these primula leaves. It depends on the colour of the primula as to the shade that the leaf actually is. The red ones do seem to have, or the pink ones seem to have quite a little bit of red going on in them, whereas this one seems to have a sort of bluey tinge. Right, lovely little opportunity here to actually drop in a little bit more yellow to indicate maybe some more flowers going on behind. So that's what you'll see as you go along, little areas where something is just sort of dictating itself. Maybe there'll be some petal shapes or a leaf shape that you can work something into. And that's exciting, you know, you've got to allow that sort of thing to happen. In my opinion, this is the most pleasurable and the most exciting technique of all with watercolour, because it is unpredictable, because lovely things happen, and watercolour likes to just make its own way, and in so doing you will actually feel quite pleased with yourself if you allow that to happen, and so it does get quite exciting. I'm going to just indicate another part of a leaf just over here, because some of my leaves are actually coming out the top of the back of my subject here. So I'm getting hard and soft edges where the water's where the paint is dry in some places but still quite damp in others. If you can get hold of a Primula, I actually think it's quite a good one to start with if you haven't done very much loose painting before, because it's quite forgiving in the shapes that you can create. Right, so that's good. I need some more leaf, I think. The thing is surrounded by leaf actually, so let's see what I can do here. The leaves are actually quite big, but I'm just reducing them in size a little bit. All the time, I do tend to dot around because all the time I've got my eye on other areas that I've painted where maybe I can drop a little bit of something else in while it's still damp, just to bring it up a bit or change it. And I think it's more organic painting that way, just, you know, allowing your painting to develop and not just working on one area or the same area all the time. Okay. So these darks are really helping to emphasize the pale flowers. Dropping some of that lovely yellow back in as well. Having said all that, don't touch too much, and if something's drying up and looking nice, leave it, because you may not improve it by touching it again too much. Right, I think I need one more part of the flower at least here. Maybe just turn the pot round so that I can see something different going on. They're very close together. Yeah, I think I need one here. Peeping out from behind the background there. Seems to make little star shapes, that centre. So I'm letting it just pop in there to create some shadow into my flower. You see, I don't think those flowers need very much more to bring them out. I think they look all right. So just a little bit of depth maybe in one or two of the centres, but not anything too significant at all. Right, another leaf here, I think. No idea how time's going. I think I've probably almost used up my half an hour, but never mind. Bear with me. So, coming out here this way, I think. that central vein virtually closes as you get further towards the point, this end, the pointy end. So you'll need to keep an eye on what the subject is doing, but really not following it slavishly at all. So now I think I can go maybe a little bit darker into here. Oh, now I know where I'm at. I've had my half an hour, but that's all right. We'll go over time a little bit because I haven't got too much more to do. Because I do feel I've shown you the technique. So if you're going back in the way I am at the moment, whatever you do, don't go over anything that you like the look of and you think is really pretty. Leave it. Don't try to emphasise it or do anything with it. It is so important not to touch too much. Just little things here and there where it's dry, not when it's wet. Just to bring up a little bit more reality and a little bit more detail and emphasising shapes. But actually, if you're careful about the shapes you make in the first place, there'll be little of that to do, which is a good thing. But putting a little bit more depth around a light area will obviously help to bring out a nice, light shape. Okay, so what am I going to do now? I think I'll need to indicate one more very soft leaf here, just sitting behind. As I said, I'm not following my subject at all. I'm just using it for reference. And it's going to look completely different. Well, not completely different, but very different when it's dry. And better. Because there are some shapes that I've actually created that don't show up until they're dry. Right, so that's brought that background all the way out now. And all I have to do now is decide what to do here. So if it's sitting in the garden, you could ground it, but mine actually is sitting in a pot, so I'm going to go with that. So I'm putting a little bit of Payne's Grey in what I've got left of my cobalt blue. I'm going to be really brave and just indicate this bowl with a few strokes. And not worrying about completing it. I think it might look good if I had a little bit of green here. That's brought this little one out that's sitting over the pot. And I like that bit of blue shadow there. Now I need just some shadow underneath my flowers and leaves, but keeping this pot white if I can. So shadows tend to be worrying people a bit at the moment, I've noticed. And it's always very difficult to explain what to do about shadows, because I think the shadows are going to be different on every picture that you paint. Don't just see grey and use that same mix for all of your shadows everywhere. You need to think about what you're painting against, and I just think if you actually use some of the colours that you've got going on in your subject into your shadows, it's going to look always pretty if you tend to overdo the colours, and have more life than if you actually just used a plain grey. So your shadows have got to be lively, I think, and not be allowed to overtake. So what I'm doing here is popping in some of my colour that I've got in my subject and hoping that that's actually going to still look pretty. Softening the edge, letting that just pop down there. Do I now indicate the other side of my bowl, or do I leave it like that? I can see that it's in a bowl. I don't necessarily have to do anything, but maybe I'll just do that, and that's enough. That's telling you, the viewer, that it's actually in a bowl. Now I'm looking at the overall shape of my picture and wondering if there's anything I need to do at this point, and really I should let it dry first before doing this, but I haven't the time. I don't want to switch off particularly. So the shape I think's alright. I think I could do with just a little bit of something coming up here, a little bit of greenery perhaps, indicating part of a leaf, just to give some balance at the top of the page, which I hadn't really got. But this is the point where you could just carry on and just keep on fiddling, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to stop, apart from putting a little bit of something here to bring it together. There's a bit of a no man's land going on here. So it's a good idea to just leave it, go and make a cup of coffee or something, stand back, look at your picture at this point, and you'll see better what you need to do, if anything. And really, I haven't touched it more than I've had to. I've kept it free, I've kept it light. I think it looks okay, but you'll see when I actually attach it whether or not I've done any more to it, but I don't see that I need to do a lot, and I think I've shown you the technique that I hope you'll use this week. Choose a different flower if you don't want to paint this one. Maybe choose lots of flowers and do a page just painting them loosely. Everything doesn't have to be a picture, and see how you get on. If you draw first, I just find it so difficult painting loosely and then having to paint over the top of a drawing, because it just restricts where I want it to go and where the paint wants to go, and I tend to follow the pencil lines. But if you feel that you need to draw first, keep it very light and to a minimum, and don't be afraid to not follow your pencil lines. Okay, so we'll let that dry because actually it is quite wet still, while I just show you another one I did, because I've got a pink one as well, and I did this quickly in exactly the same sort of way. So choose a different colour if you feel that yellow is too tricky, and it can be. And keep a limited palette still, and paint in the same way, doing painting another colour, starting with a focal point. This is another one I thought I'd show you. So if you're painting a larger flower, then that flower can actually have its own focal point. So it's stronger, obviously, within the centre of it, but it gets paler as you paint further petals, and another indicating another rose behind, instead of, you know, creating just a random background. Looks nice. And surrounding it by leaf, which is, you know, creating its own background for you. But don't always think that you have to paint the leaves green. They can be another colour, and here I've used the shadow colour with the orangey colour and the blue, which has made this lovely sort of grey leafy colour, and created the background with that. So that's just another idea. All right, so I'd better stop, and you'll see what my picture looks like when I attach it and when it's dry. Okay. So I think I'll send you a printout with tips and so on. So that's I don't need to go over that now. And next week is the beginning of a new set, and I thought that now that we've loosened up a bit throughout this month, it might be a good idea to transfer that looseness to some lovely landscapes. So we'll paint some landscapes and try and keep the loose and free technique going on within the landscapes, okay? And obviously soon we'll be painting more flowers, because there'll be more flowers coming and more around. So we'll have another go at painting flowers this way some other time. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.